Okay, Google, turn on reading lamp.
Got it. Turning on the reading lamp.
The singing tree. Chapter B. Chapter 5. For conspicuous bravery, subtitle of chapter 5. You saw the picture with the dog and the houses. Lily had been at the farm now for almost 2 months. The day after the wedding, her father brought her out, a sulky, silent Lily, dressed in a plain blue dress that made her look what she was, a little girl. She suffered mother's hearty kiss without responding, with even so much as a smile. And Kate might as well have been thin air for all the attention Lily paid to her. When mother let her into the house to show her the room she had fixed up, put on my reading glasses, might help us all. When mother let her into the house to show her the room she had fixed up for my summer baby, father turned to Judge Cormos. Don't look so worried, Bella. She'll get used to us and have a good time. Page 103. Oh, it isn't that, sighed the judge. She didn't mind coming here. I know she enjoyed her short visit with you at Easter, and it's those confounded puppies she had lost her heart to. What puppies? Well, puffed Judge Cormos, easing his bulky frame onto a bench under the apple tree. Last night, when I went to Verity's with my heart in my boots, to be frank, to take her home, I fully expected one of her tantrums. And after all, she'd never been dumped into a pile of straw before, and you know what I found? There she was, nestled in the straw with Verity's old dog licking her face and a lap full of pups swarming all over that precious Paris model of a dress. Then Verity had to speak out of turn and tell her she could have the whole litter for all he cared. And then the tantrum came. We had to peel those puppies off her. They yelped, and their mother howled, and Lily out-yelled the lot of them. He wiped his forehead. I'll tell you, Martin, it was a riot. Did she want them? Want them? It's all she thinks and talks about. But little fat ones, breathed Kate, turning an eager face to Judge Cormos. He chuckled, smiling at the thought of those puppies himself. Little fat leaky ones, all brown silk fuzz. And well, then why didn't you bring one along for Lily? Asked father. He sent a sidelong glance toward Kate, or two. 3, grinned Jancy, pointing to himself. I've never had a puppy. Petty was an old dog, and now he is dead. 3, father. Good. Can I go get them right now? Me too, please, Uncle Martin, pleaded Kate, tugging at his sleeve. He looked at Judge Cormos, laughing. Will you trust Jancy with your horse and buggy? He is a careful driver. I'd trust Jancy with anything, nodded the judge. And thank you, Martin, but Kate and Jancy didn't hear the rest. They were already in the buggy and off. When a couple hours later they drove into the yard, they saw Lily leaning up against the well, kicking idly at clumps of grass. "Hey, Lily," called Kate, "look what we got." Lily shrugged and turned her head away, and Chansey threw the reins around the hitching post and lifted a basket out of the buggy. A chorus of yipping complaints started up inside, and Lily spun around. "What? What have you got there?" she asked, her voice half eager and half suspicious. And Jancy sat down in the basket on the shady grass under the apple tree. He winked at Kate because Lily was coming, reluctantly at first, but then with a sudden rush. "Pupsies? Why, they're my puppies!" she cried, falling on her hands and knees beside the basket. She reached in with both hands and lifted one out, pressing it to her face. "This one, he chewed my ear yesterday. Look, he knows me. See, he's chewing me again." She laughed, her face shining with happiness. Then, as Kate beamed back at her, she frowned. Are they yours?" "We can each have one," said Kate. "You pick yours first because you found them." Lily gave a squeal of joy. "This is mine, this little..." nibbling rascal. "Oh, I'm so happy now. You know, I've never had a puppy, and I've always wanted one." "So did I," said Kate and Jancy together, each reaching for a puppy. Lily opened her eyes wide. "Honest, I thought you had all kind of pets here. Chickens, lambs, and horses." "Sure, but you can't hold a horse in your lap and squeeze him like this." "Woo!" Jancy began to laugh. "Well, it's a good thing you can't do that to a horse." "Your pet is leaking." "They do," giggled Lily, "and you should have seen my dress yesterday, but I don't mind." She turned over on her stomach and rubbed her face against the squirming puppy. "Rascal. I'll call him Rascal. What will you call yours?" "Wags," cried Jancy, pointing at his puppy's tiny rear end. It was trying to wag its tail, but his whole round self wagged with it. "I'll call mine Friend," decided Kate, and smiled to herself. She turned over too, and Jancy followed suit. The three heads bent over the puppies, close together. "Rascal, Wags, and Friend," sighed Lily contentedly. Then, without looking up, she pushed Kate a little with her shoulder, and "I was awful mad at you yesterday, but I'm not now. This is fun." The cousin's eyes met for a moment. It was a brief glance, but its meaning was clear to both. Maybe Lily wasn't going to be so bad after all. "Want to see my chickens?" To an outsider, this may have been just a casual question, but all three knew it was a peace treaty. "We could teach you to ride if you'd like to." Jancy was doing his share too. "Then we could go out and see my herd, and the lambs, and hundreds and thousands of them, Lily, like a big white cloud rolling over the meadow, and Pista would tell us stories, nice creepy ones." And three heads pressed closer together, and three pairs of legs were kicking and waving in the air, and the center of it all, the three puppies went peacefully to sleep, not at all disturbed by the giggle interspersed talk over their heads. By the time Mother called them in for the noonday meal, the three children had made plans enough not for one summer, but for 10. They prattled on all through the meal, unmindful of the amused glances of the grown-ups. Only Jancy noticed toward the end of the meal the men's conversation had taken a serious turn. that the jovial, round face of Judge Cormos had lost its smile, and father was frowning. Strange words, sinister words, his ear had absorbed while his thoughts were still on their childish plans, echoed in his mind now. Words with a vaguely ugly meaning. Assassination. Rights of minorities. Ultimatum to Serbia. Mobilization. War. War. War? Uncle Sandor rose and began to pace the room, up and down, up and down. I tell you, he cried, the government is playing with fire, and if Austria declares war and we are dragged into it, this country is doomed. The judge grunted, Bah! We would crush the Serbs. He pressed a broad thumbnail down on a crumb of bread. Like this, in 2 weeks it would be all over. And why should we? Demanded Uncle Sandor hotly. What have we got against the Serbs? Just because a fanatic, a misled, misguided youngster has killed the man who was the symbol of Austrian threats, Austrian greed and domination? Is that reason enough for plunging 2 countries into war? Would a war give his life back to him? His voice broke, his hands dropped, and he began to pace the room again. Jancy's puzzled eyes turned to father. He was still frowning, his face set and dark, more serious than Jancy had ever seen it. He was looking straight at Jancy, but it was many moments before a glimmer of smile showed in his eyes, and then it calmed down slowly, as if it had to fight its way through dark clouds of worry. Jancy, why don't you and Kate show Lily the garden? She could pick some flowers for Judge Cormos to take home. He said, run along. He added almost impatiently when Jancy didn't move. Then gently, run along, son, while the sun is still shining. The children went, and as the door closed on them, Kate laughed. Uncle Martin must be all mixed up. It's only noon, and the sun won't go down for ages. Tell you what, let's go down to the brook first and pick forget-me-nots. She looked at Jancy. Hey, old somber face, what are you frowning about? What your father said, began Jancy, but she tweaked his nose. Oh, Daddy, he's forever preaching. Don't you know him yet? Come on. That was 2 months ago. Since then, the puppies had grown almost twice their size, and they were awkward little dogs, or rollicking, romping, and getting into everybody's way, and chewing to rags everything chewable. 3 little clowns who could bring laughter to father's face and sometimes chase away the worried wrinkles from Sandor Nagy's forehead. Not always, for in those 2 months, those vaguely sinister words, ultimatum, mobilization, war, had become realities for all. Hungary was at war. Not only Hungary, all Europe. Since July 28th, when Austria-Hungary had declared war on Serbia. Every day, every mail that reached the village had brought news of more and more countries declaring war on one another. Russia against Austria-Hungary. Germany against France. England against Germany. At first, the news was only words, too, little black words printed on paper. But as time went on, they took on life and began to move, became the marching feet of men, the rumbling wheels of trains and cannon. One evening after supper, at the end of a blazing, breathless August day, The family was sitting under the apple tree. They had They had been out in the wheat fields since dawn. Even Lily had worked along with Kate, carrying water to the hired men and women, helping to take care of babies whom their mothers had brought along, and it had been the last day of harvest. Now all the wheat and rye fields lay bare and brown, and the barns were full of golden grain. Lily rolled over and over on the grass, trying to hide her sunburned nose from Rascal's too friendly tongue. She sat up, hugging the ecstatic little dog to her. "Oh, Rascal, this is fun. Honestly." She sent a shining smile at Father. "I've never been this happy in my life, Uncle Martin. I don't want to go back to that school. Couldn't I stay, please, forever and ever and ever?" Father smiled and rumpled her already rumpled blonde curls. "That isn't for me to say, Lily. We would like to keep you forever and ever. But you'll have to ask your father." Lily pounded. "You can't talk to him now. He always looks as black as thunder and talks about drafts and enlistments and things. War is a nuisance anyway it changes people." "To say the least," said Kate's father with a dry little chuckle. Father only sighed. He had been answering questions all day, worried, puzzled questions of his men. "What are they fighting about, Mr. Nagy? Do we have to go to war too? And will I have to leave my wife? Children? What will become of them? Who will take care of them?" They all came to him, and he answered as well as he could, promising to take care of their families in case they'd have to go, but evading the one question that was the uppermost in their minds. What are they fighting about? To that, he didn't know the answer. His thoughts were interrupted by one sharp bark and two answering growls. Rascal Wags and friend broke away from the family circle and galloped across the yard, making enough noise for one medium-sized watchdog. Chansey peered through the hazy dusk. "It's your father's buggy." "Lily, hello?" "Over here, Judge Cormos, under the tree," he shouted. A dark figure alighted from the buggy and moved towards the tree. Father rose and said, "That isn't Judge Cormos. He's too thin. Aaron, is that you?" Spurs clinked, and Aaron said in a low voice, "Reserve Lieutenant Aaron Mandelbaum. Since this morning, I have been called." "Another wedding?" cried Kate, and clapped her hands against her lips as the truth suddenly dawned on her. The dark eyes in Aaron's face turned toward her. He smiled. "I wish it were, little Kate. Or maybe it is." He added in a strange voice, "The devil's own wedding, with death for a fiddler." Then he addressed himself to Father again. I received orders to take the first unit out of our territory tomorrow. All men between 22 and 30. I'm to take them to Budapest, according to the Black Widow, Budapest, for distributions to their own regiments. Then I have to join my regiment on the Russian front. We leave at noon," he added after a little silence. Martin Nagy brushed his hand across his forehead. "Let's go inside. I want to talk to you." "I'd rather not," said Aaron almost gruffly. "I have to go right back, and I only came to ask you to come in tomorrow if you can." Why, of course we'll come see you off, and we'll all go in," cried Mother. Thank you. I hoped you would. I counted on it." Aaron's voice sounded strangely constrained, and they couldn't see his face now. "I may not have time to say goodbye tomorrow or ask you to do a great favor for me, so I'm asking you now. Anything we can do, began Father. I know this. He held out a white envelope to Father. This is the favor. Please open it after I have left, not before. I want you to promise, not before I am out of the village. Of course, I promise, said Father. Taking the envelope, Aaron sighed deeply. You'll understand why I'm burdening you with this. It takes a strong man to carry that envelope where it has to go, stronger than I am. And so I will just say, until we meet again, and thank you. He went, spurs clinking across the dark yard, and soon the yellow lanterns on the buggy disappeared between the poplars on the lane. And so next morning the family left again to drive into the village with a wagon full of flowers. Kate and Lily had gathered all the blazing red and yellow zinnias, roses, and deep blue cornflowers, fragrant rosemary, sweet mignonette. They stripped the garden of all its bloom to make up countless small, tight bouquets. There were enough for all the men who were leaving, enough to throw under the horses' feet as the wagons, filled with singing, waving men, began to roll out of the village. All the little gardens must have been stripped bare, because when the wagons had disappeared behind the clouds of dust, the whole long village street was covered with flowers. Uncle Moses was still waving long after Aaron had ridden off behind the last wagon. He wiped his eyes stealthily. Don't cry, Mama, he smiled into Aunt Sarah's brimming eyes. Don't you cry. Be glad, like I am. Our son makes a fine Hungarian officer. He is going to fight for our country. Mama, be proud of him. Kate turned around, and they had all been standing in front of the store and saw that Aunt Sarah was groping for a handkerchief. She made a move to give her one, but Lily was quicker. Lily, her own eyes brimming, had one arm around Aunt Sarah's shoulders and was wiping her face gently. He wore your flowers over his heart, Lily was saying. Did you see, Aunt Sarah? And he let me kiss him goodbye. 2. I kissed all of them goodbye, for luck. The glances of Kate and Jancy met and parted to exchange brief messages of surprise with the rest of the family. They all thought the same thing, but only Jancy put it into words. Who would have believed this? He said, shaking his head a little, as if he still couldn't believe what he saw. Somewhere, somehow, in the past 2 months, they had lost that Lily, the flouncing, peevish, bored Lily, and found this sunburned little girl to whom Aunt Sarah was clinging now, saying, I am sure it will bring them luck, my child. People began to drift back into their homes, and Mother was getting restless. I've got to do my washing today, or you won't have a clean shirt for Sunday, she reminded Father. They were driving out of the village when Father stopped the horses and drew Aaron's white envelope out of his pocket. Let's see what this mysterious package is. He smiled, ripping it open. A small golden disc with a red ribbon on it fell out and clattered on the wagon floor. Jancy picked it up. For conspicuous bravery, it's on the bottom, page 117. I'll continue on 116. Conspicuous bravery in the presence of the enemy. He read slowly, turning the little shining disc around and around. Then he looked up quickly because Mother was asking, What is it, Martin? What is it? Father began to read from the slip of white paper he held in his hand. It's the sad duty of the War Department to inform you that your brother, Rabbi Joseph Mandelbaum, was killed in the first battle on the Russian front while administering aid to the wounded caught between the firing lines. The last words were hardly more than a whimper, drowned in the silence around him. Only the paper rustled as he folded it up carefully, slowly, because his fingers were trembling. The midday sun beat down on the endless plains. Heat rose from the shorn fields and shimmered above the brown stubble. Farther away, sheep were grazing. From the scant shade of a lone tree came the plaintive, silvery sound of a shepherd's flute. A lark, envious perhaps of the sweet sounds, burst into song, flinging its small body into the air, soaring higher and higher until its song seemed to drift down from heaven itself. Little thin Joseph, with the silver voice, said Kate's father, "Remember, Martin, when we went to school together and the old teacher used to begin every morning with singing the Magyar hymn. We all used to stand up and bellow our lungs out at first, but Joseph always finished it alone. We just had to listen to that soaring voice of his that could turn a song into a prayer. Remember?" Father remembered. He rose and began to say the words of the Magyar hymn. "God bless us, all Hungarians, with freedom, joy, prosperity." Somehow the tune crept into his voice, and all of them were singing, standing with bared hands and folded hands. "Help us with thy protecting arms when we fight our enemy." The lone shepherd must have heard them, because long after the hymn was ended, his silvery flute echoed the tune, and the invisible lark trilled an accompaniment to it from the sky. "Son," said Father huskily, "you drive home. I have to go back to do what Aaron couldn't do." "I'm coming with you, said Mother. The others looked after them as they walked back slowly, arm in arm, treading the path now of withered and dusty flowers. Martin Nagy's shoulders were bowed as if he were carrying a heavy weight. Into Kate's mind flashed a memory of just 2 short months ago, and she had glanced at her father's face. He must have been thinking the same thing, because he said, "That tall farmer will never let the Mandelbaums go alone." Short chapter today. Page 119 out of just over 229. I'd love to read another chapter tonight, but I shan't. Some more of the beautiful artwork of the book. The singing tree.